Impact Teams Radio. Welcome to Impact Teams Radio, the show where we explore what it takes to be a leader of the leaders in corporate America. Get ready to be inspired and discover proven tips for going from average to exceptional. Now, here's your host and guide, Tony Sherman.
And welcome to another episode of Impact Teams Radio. I'm your host, Tony Sherman, and I'm really excited today because we have John Mitchell, who is the Senior VP of IT in New Breed Logistics. But when you look at John's arc of his career, he's obviously been building a portfolio of experience and deliverables over the years. He's worked for some of the biggest names in corporate America. I'm just scanning down his LinkedIn profile right now, and I can see Pet Boys, I can see Teradata, I can see Lowe's, I can see HP. Seriously, if we're going to talk to a leader of leaders in corporate America, John would be a great person to talk to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step back for a couple of minutes, ask John to introduce himself to us, tell us a bit about himself, and then we'll do a deep dive into his career and what he's learned about leadership in corporate America. Let me take a breath and say, welcome, John.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate the chance to get to talk to you. It's always one of my favorite things to do is to talk to people about leadership and the experiences that set people apart and allow them to perform at a level in a career that, in my case, has done this for almost 30 years. So a lot of fun things to talk about when we talk about leadership.
Thank you, John. So why don't I step back and give you the microphone for a few minutes and just ask you to introduce yourself to us. Tell us a little bit about your background.
You know, I started my career, fortunately, with a company that is now HP, but it was EDS at the time. I graduated from college and with a degree in computer information systems, and it was at the moment in time when EDS was acquired by General Motors, so there was a huge need for people at that point in time for folks that can write code and do systems analysis and those types of things. So I was lucky enough to hitch my wagon out of college to one of the best brands and one of the best run companies in the industry. And at that time, facilities management was the huge term that the IT professional world was using as businesses were outsourcing their entire IT departments to folks like EDS. And you know, EDS with Ross Perot was just a phenomenal company. So I got the opportunity to be trained by folks by a company that invested in the culture, in the technology, in the process of how things got done. And EDS was it was a leader and, a shining star in the outsourcing industry back in the 80s and early 90s. So I got the opportunity to be trained, learn project management, learn how things got done, and then to grow my career from writing code all the way through becoming a leader. So very quickly in my career, I found a desire to move to the leadership side of IT and not necessarily the writing the code. I had a passion for understanding the business problems and working with the leaders in the area and delivering solutions. So got a great opportunity to learn a lot about General Motors and how car invoicing works and how the manufacturer worked with the dealerships. Got great exposure to state and local government while I was at EDS. But, I spent 10 years of my career there, and one of the things that I learned after I left EDS, at the end of my career at EDS before I left, EDS stopped growing at 18 to 20% a year, and the company had not experienced that before. So it was one of those reckoning moments where it's like, oh, really? There are other options as opposed to being a high growth, fast, oriented type of company that was just winning new business all the time. And we went through some right sizing, and that my point in my career when I was at that point I was leading a team of a side of like 100 plus folks. So it was a time where John learned the other dimensions of leadership and how to look and see things and how they were moving forward. So as I took my career from EDS to Lowe's, one of the things that I quickly learned when I left EDS was EDS taught me so many things about what leaders do and how they behave and what a good leader looked like, that when I went to Lowe's, which I saw as a tremendous opportunity going from one growth company to another, I quickly went from running a team of 15 people at Lowe's to, again, running teams of over 100 folks. And a lot of it turned around as I worked with peers at that point in my career. I learned that I had skills that they necessarily were not exposed to because their career path didn't take them through a large company like EDS and the training that they were committed to. So, from a leadership standpoint, one thing I learned very quickly in moving from EDS to Lowe's is not all folks are trained with the same types of information and technique and skills that others are. So that was a huge thing for me in my career. The second thing I learned as I went from EDS to Lowe's is that you need to being in the right place at the right time is really important, because while I always aspired to do really good at what I'm doing and I have a passion for it, there are other folks like that. But what you need to do is demonstrate that readiness and that capability and demonstrate that you can fulfill the mission that you're given in the company. But most importantly, I've also learned that I was in the right place at the right time. One of the reasons my career took the growth spurt that it did while at EDS and while at Lowe's is because I was with two great companies that had needs and were growing. And as in big corporate America, as you're growing, one of the first places companies tend to look for candidates are inside. So if you're demonstrating that you can do your job and do it well, then I believe that you get the opportunity to do those new things. And I personally experienced that. So Lowe's, what a great retail story. I rose to the point of VP at Lowe's, and finally left Lowe's and ultimately went to Pep Boys to be the CIO at Pep Boys and lead that company, which brought me to a new set of challenges of I was back to, here's a company that's struggling in the marketplace and yet has a proud heritage of delivering services to customers. But, the challenges were, how do you do more, or how do you do the same with even less investment in technology and people and a lot of things? And it was an interesting challenge. And for me personally, it gave me the opportunity to run an entire IT department, but it also gave me the opportunity to learn more a broader responsibility in IT. Because at that point, before I took the reins at Pep Boys, my primary focus in my career was around the application development and delivering the solutions. It wasn't so much around the infrastructure. So great opportunity for me at Pep Boys to learn and to deal with technology in different ways. And then finally, I'm now at New Breed Logistics, which by brand name we're known as a third-party logistics, but our company does so much more than that. But we're providing services to many of the top 50 Fortune 50 companies in the world here, and we're delivering services that, in some cases, gets a product from point A to point B. In some cases, we're making sure that the factories are running because we're delivering the parts and the services that are needed to the factory floor so that the things can get out the door. In some cases, we are making sure that customers are able to use mobile devices and their phones in order to, have conversations. And so I took this opportunity personally because in my career, in what I was exposed to, it was about me not knowing as much about logistics and supply chain as I wanted. And this opportunity came calling, and I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to learn more about logistics and become a deeper leader in this area. So that's where I'm at right now, Tony, is at New Breed Logistics.
That's a huge arc that you've got there, John. So I just want to unpack some of the things that you've touched on, maybe too briefly almost, but obviously after 30 years, you can't cover it all in 5 minutes. But one of the things, and you're not the first person I've spoken to from EDS, EDS definitely had a huge training program, and then you notice the difference from an EDS environment to a Lowe's environment. And that's not saying anything about Lowe's. I think that's more saying something about EDS. But these days, Tom Peters would say that everybody is their own company, if you will. Everyone's responsible for the arc of their success and development. And if that's the case, and I believe it is, what should a young leader look for in terms of getting the leadership skills that you identified in EDS, but it's almost you identified when you didn't have them in Lowe's? What were those kind of skills and training that you got that you would recommend people starting out in a corporate career to make sure that they get early and often?
Yeah, great question. I think, for me personally, from a leadership standpoint, any investment you make in how to get things done, and we typically call those words like project management. How do you get things done? How do you get it organized? How do you ensure that what you're wanting to deliver actually gets delivered? And in most cases, that has to do with having a good plan, understanding the agreed upon scope, and getting folks aligned in that direction. Because most projects that I see that succeed or fail, it's all around issue management, and when things arise in the project, that you get people involved and you get the solution solved. And whether it's you're mitigating a risk, or whether you have solved a problem so that the project can move forward, those are the skills that make the difference in the make or break, and the people that really get things done, and the ones that don't get things done at the pace that the business needs. So project management, and I'm not using the word primarily as the discipline, as a PMP stamp, although that's important, and I recognize it, and I applaud folks that invest and understand how to get things done. But I'm also referring to project management as the function of how you escalate, how you recognize that this needs to get done and how it gets done. And part of that gets to be with, as you come into a company, understanding how things get done, because one of the things I've learned in many different companies is things get done very differently, and a lot of that difference has to do with culture, and some of it is real difference in that the business truly does operate differently, and it needs to operate differently. But understanding that very quickly, that this is how this company goes about its business and how it gets things done as a leader is really important, because it shortens your runway of being more effective. So I would say that, EDS taught me a lot about project management. They invested a tremendous amount in culture. And by that I mean, as a leader, I was expected to talk about the cultural values of the company and to stand up in front of a group of folks, or whether they worked for me, whether they were peers, or whether they were people I didn't know, and talk to them about what made EDS a great company and what we value. And that paid dividends time and time again, because, a company that's selling services, knowing what the secret sauce is and what you're about and being able to articulate it to a client is invaluable, and it is the thing that the client, it's that unwritten thing in the RFP that people see, and they go, wow, these people not only say it, you can actually just see it in how they communicate, in their body language, and in the tone of their voice. So those skills about knowing how to get things done, understanding quickly the culture and what you're trying to, and then embrace that culture, and then understand how to operate in that culture, are things that I think differentiate folks from, as individual performers and ultimately leaders in companies.
So, the notes I took down there were obviously project management, not just in its limited PMP, as you said, skill set, but also learning how to plan out an assignment, learning the communication skills, knowing that when things go wrong, how you'll do issue management, how will you identify. One of the greatest little takeaways I took from project management training early on, problem is a risk whose time has come. So can you manage risk? When they become problems, do you know how to resolve the issues? And then, like you said, how to get to done. Because if you're going to add value in an environment, understanding how to get to done is the most important thing, and how to get to done in the environment you're working in. And obviously, as an EDS, especially as an account manager, you're honing those skills on a daily basis. Most of us don't get that kind of baptism by fire. But if you were to step back and say, looking at those kind of deliverables that you've done, what are one or two of the things that didn't go quite so well that you learned a lot from, having done that, walking through the fire yourself?
One of the biggest projects I ever personally led was a project at the end of right before I left EDS, implementing a new Medicaid claims processing system for the state of Vermont. And in that, EDS had aggressively bid the time that we would turn that project around. And in the length of time that we were going to implement, so that let's say the time was May when we were supposed to go live, we actually ended up going live in December. So it was a huge miss in terms of the timing. Now, the lucky thing that EDS had at the time, they had the existing contract, so there was not a huge financial penalty as a result of it, but it was still reputational branding issues, which EDS took very seriously. So at that point in my career, that was by far the biggest project I had ever been associated with or been responsible for. And it was the first miss of any magnitude of days. And one of the first things I learned, and I've said this throughout my whole career, is bad news doesn't get better with age. And the tendency is that, good news goes down, or good news goes up and bad news goes down. And it's just quite frankly, the opposite is what makes an organization effective, is that we are saying upward to management, we have a problem, we're escalating, I need your help. So one of the things I found out very quickly as I came onto this project, that what was being communicated to management versus true status was they were separate. So we worked very quickly to reestablish that, which created some amount of difficult conversations, but they were going to be difficult regardless of whether that conversation was had today or 2 weeks from today. So I learned very quickly that when things are off track, that the best you can do is to be truthful and escalate and get management's involvement, because levels above us in the organization have a lot more resources typically than I have, and they can bring more to bear and help me solve problems in ways that I could not have imagined, because I did not have the breadth of view to understand there were other options. So as soon as we got management more involved, there were more resources showing up at the site of different skill sets, and that we got our project more on track. And while we missed the date, we actually were able to pull it in a little more quickly than we would have if we would have just tried to just muffle through and manage it within the four walls of our building and our project. So escalation of information and the asking for help is such a key component to making sure things can actually get done.
Actually, I love the way, I've heard the phrase bad news doesn't get better with age, but I love the way that you then unpack that slightly and said, turn it on its head. Bad news should go up, good news should go down. And I took that as a no. I thought, okay, that is just a simple but powerful thing. And as you were saying it was resonating with my 20-odd years of IT project management. That's just the truth. And I like the fact that you articulated that bosses have more resources. So the further up you go, the more resources they've got, and they're willing to, and they want you to succeed. That's what most people forget in a corporate environment. Your bosses want nothing more than your success. So they will bring everything to bear for you. So that's actually a very, very powerful insight. As you were going up, obviously, I know that EDS is a very powerful engine in terms of the way it trains people and mentored people. And also, basically, it threw you in the deep end fairly quickly. So you learned a lot quickly. But outside of that, have you had mentors that you accredit the depth of your learning as a leader to?
Yeah, there are folks, when I had career growth throughout, that you're absolutely right. There are mentors along the way. At Lowe's, I invested time in the levels that were a couple of levels above me, and I got someone's attention, and they were someone that would sit down and say, John, this person had been in retail for 15 years in IT, so they knew a lot. And as I took my career from the skill set of the car manufacturer and state government and went to retail, I had a lot to learn. So I fortunately very quickly established some relationships with someone that had worked at one of the biggest name in this country in retail, Walmart. And this person had huge experience. And so we became, even though he was 2 levels above me, we became good friends. And I started getting knowledge about how things operated. And one time I got I got a project once at Lowe's to do labor scheduling. And he came to me and said, John, in my career, labor scheduling has seen a lot of people lose their jobs because it never turned out to be the benefit that most companies expect labor scheduling to have. Because, as you well expect, there are 2 main drivers of cost in retail, labor and cost of goods. And so everyone looks at labor very tightly, because anything you can do to drive labor out of the stores, because you have so many stores out there, it's a big number. But the difficulty of being successful there, because as you get a system to tell you, hey, you should schedule people at 9:20 a.m. until 5:15 9:15 p.m. and that would save you money. Well, the trouble is most people don't want to show up at work at 9:20, and most people want to leave at 5. So the actual execution of what that system does versus what people actually do, there's a disconnect. So, from a personal standpoint, he came to me and gave me that information. And while I still had the project, I worked really hard to make sure people understood the barriers, the things that had to be overcome in order for this solution to be successful. And ultimately, we rolled it out in a pilot phase in a district, and spent time reviewing it. And it was more of a methodical rollout. And the company, I think, because he gave me that advice, I think the company was able to make better use of the tool and understand the benefits and the shortcomings of the tool because there was practical knowledge about what it was doing. So yeah, mentoring is just, we need to be smart enough to look around and see who we learn from, because right now, even with the title of Senior Vice President, I'm always looking for mentors. Who can I learn from? And whether that mentor is in the four walls of the company I'm working at or whether it's a relationship, mentoring is just a key to me being a better and a more effective leader, because careers are long times, and we all, it's an up and down. There are moments of your career where you have accomplished, and it's just great stuff, and there's times where there's not as much going on, and you need to make sure that you're learning and building those relationships throughout that entire career.
That's great. I love the idea of, if somebody gives you effectively like the third rail of politics, as it were, and you've got that, one, that's a heads up, but the idea that you piloted it first, you were doing expectation management all the way down the line. Sometimes you do have to grab the short end of the stick. And so the thing is, be smart about it. You can't say, well, I don't want it. It's not a nice project, but you can pilot it. You can do expectation management. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah, that's a huge story on the value of mentoring. So John, I want to give you the last couple of minutes at the mic and say, as you just think about our conversation and anything maybe that was resonating with you, or maybe that you think, I don't want to leave without saying this. If you were to talk to our listeners who are typically looking at our demographics, they're in the 5 to 15 years in corporate America, and maybe they're starting to say, okay, how do I make this work for me? I'm going to be in corporate America. What do I do to become a leader of leaders? What would you tell them?
I would say a couple of things. One, I would go back to the point I made that you have to be ready. And by that, I mean, you have to demonstrate that you're committed, that you're learning, that you're investing in your career. One of the things that I learn as we're starting more hiring from entry level into our company, which is a new thing. And one of the beauties of that is you bring in this new brand of kid that's coming in and that's got a different perspective, and they learn differently, and there's different tools for them to learn, because we had a problem that we were trying to solve, and this person, in order for them to learn, they pulled up YouTube and found a video and learned how to do something, because that education opportunity was right there, and they were connected to it, and they were used to learning in that capacity. So I think we all have to be open to the idea that learning is an important dynamic of what we do. It's always changing, and we always need to keep current, and we need to stay committed to doing more, learning more, and demonstrating that we are always able and willing to step up. And, that principle in and of itself does not guarantee success, but that principle gives you the opportunity to be ready for when the success comes, or when the opportunity comes, to say, I'm the person. So, I was told a long time ago that empowerment, all it means at the base level is realizing that I have a choice, so that I'm ready to stand up. I'm ready to say, yes, I can do this, but the choice is mine. And if I don't like the surroundings or what's going on, myself, me as the person that is in control of what I do, I get to choose, how I respond, how I take on this opportunity, and being ready for those. Demonstrating that you're committed, that you've invested time and energy, and you have results. I mean, one of the things that happens in today's world in the interviewing process anymore is it's a results-based interview. Tell me a time when you did this. Demonstrate a time when this occurred and how you responded. So people want to understand that not only do you have the skills, the abilities, and the commitment, but you've demonstrated results and you have achievement, and you can articulate that to folks along the way. So being ready for the opportunity is real important because you don't know when it's going to show up. Things happen day in and day out, month in, month out. And I can go back, and it's so much easier to look back on my career in hindsight and go, gee whiz, that was a great moment. And it just so happened it worked out for me. Because if I hadn't been ready, or I hadn't done X, or I hadn't done Y, maybe that opportunity wouldn't have come to John. He wouldn't have that opportunity to be a leader. So that passion of being ready, of committed. And, the other point I would make, and I said it earlier, is embrace the culture of the company you're working with or for. It's important that you understand what the company is trying to accomplish, how it's going to market, and you align yourself to that concept and understand how your department, how the value chain from beginning to end, how it all contributes to making sure that mission is accomplished. And your ability to articulate that, to understand it, and to know how you participate in it is an important piece that leaders up the chain, they appreciate, they understand.